Welcome to today's Iris session brought to you by BrightRock. BrightRock is a financial services provider operating in the life insurance market. Its interest in change and how it affects our lives derives from the fact that its life insurance offering is uniquely structured to change at times like these. So why am I telling you this? Well, because BrightRock started the Change Exchange, an online resource center that provides people with a safe space to ask questions and share knowledge to help them cope with life's biggest change moments. These are times when everything from one's sense of identity to one's personal finances is challenged, like when you finally take the plunge and buy a home of your own, for example. I'm David O'Sullivan, and today we're here to talk about the real costs of property. As many of you know, buying a property is only the start of your expenses, and there are loads of costs involved with this change moment that tend to catch homeowners off guard. Just think about costs like transfer duties and conveyancer fees, and if you sold a property to buy a new one, you're likely to have the capital gains tax and a commission fee for the property agent. And then you have the furniture removal costs and expenses like that minor plumbing job to install your appliances, not to mention the unexpected number of windows you need curtains for. The list goes on, and before you know it, you're in the red, and suddenly owning your home becomes a financial burden and everything but an investment. Today's Iris session aims to unpack the financial impact of this change moment. Joining me in the studio today, we have a well-known financial journalist from City Press, also involved with her own website, mayaonmoney.co.za. It is Maya Fisher-French. Maya, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David.
And then on our line, we've got in Durban, he's got the most fabulous backdrop to signify that he's in Durban, the CEO of privateproperty.co.za, Simon Bray. Simon, good to have you with us as well.
Thank you, David. Great to be here. I must say, after all those costs, you've talked me out of home ownership forever.
I certainly spoke myself out of ever buying a new home, but I'm going to start with you, Simon, and we'll unpack this in a bit more detail. But from a property perspective, let's just run through what it is you do at privateproperty.co.za and what you do to assist people who are about to become homeowners for the first time and don't understand the financial burdens and financial pitfalls that await them.
Yeah, private property sits right at the front of the buying cycle for someone when they're looking for a new property. So you come online, you're looking for a home in a new neighborhood, and we provide that opportunity for you to search through thousands of property listings from real estate agents, developers, banks, and of course owners that are selling their home privately. So we've got a full aggregate list of listings, but of course listings are only part of the property story. You know, finding your perfect home is one thing, but understanding how much it's going to cost you, whether you can afford it, what sort of pitfalls that you might experience is the reason why we've also got a rich resource center on the site for first-time buyers as well as experienced buyers to really unravel some of the issues that can come up with home ownership. So advice in the property industry is really, really key. You're talking about the biggest investment most people make in their lifetime. So there's a big margin for error, and a platform like ours presents as much of the options as possible. We like to think of ourselves as empowering the consumer to make the right property decision.
If I see a house on privateproperty.co.za, I look at the amount. For anybody who doesn't understand what's involved in buying a new house, you might say, well, there we go, 1.3 million rand, that's how much I need. If I go to your website, will I be able to find a mechanism, a tool, or advice to warn me of what else I'm going to be in for? That it's not just that amount. I've got to look at transfer duties. I've got to look at estate agents' commissions as well. Do you assist homeowners, home buyers, I should say, in calculating those costs as well?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we've got tools and services on the site that help you make the right property choice. So things like how much am I going to pay on the repayments on my bond? What does the affordability look like for me? So you can plug in your monthly income amounts, your monthly expenses. It can output how likely you are to be able to purchase the property, what your maximum bond amount is that you can get from a financial institution. And then it unpacks some of the costs. And I mean, you mentioned some of them, but a lot of people coming into it just look at the asking price of the property and they think that that's all they're going to spend. They don't realize the cash outlay not only at the beginning of the process, but over the years of ownership. And that can erode the value that you create through property if you're not completely aware of it. So yeah, we provide tools on the site, but it's an ever-changing space. It's a difficult space to deal with. Different property titles have different costs associated. You've got a sliding scale of fees based on the value of the property that you're talking about, how much of a home loan, how much of a deposit, whether it's a cash buy. There are all sorts of variables, so it can become quite complex, and I think that's why people are often daunted by the prospects, when they're looking at purchasing a home.
Well, let me bring you in, Maya. How daunting a prospect is buying property?
Well, you're asking someone who's done I've bought 2 homes and I've built my 3rd, and I can tell you that I think probably building it was more daunting than, than buying it. So certainly yes, but I think that is exactly the point, is that, as Simon was saying, is people have so little understanding of what it actually costs, especially the first couple of months, which is the transfer fees, the conveyancer fees, moving in, and of course municipal deposits. You have to put in huge deposits for your lights and electricity and your tax and rates. So what the banks generally found is that people would go and take out short-term loans or microloans in order to fund the deposit and all of these other expenses. So and then they started to realize these people were now trying to pay off a bond and these short-term loans, which is why we saw a move by the banks to actually extend to 110% loans. I'm not saying that that's the right way necessarily. I would advocate that you save up ahead of time for all of those costs, but that's why we saw that move by the banks to really extend credit beyond the 100%, because in recognition that it costs you a lot more than the asking price.
Now, some of the advice that you'll get from financial advisors is get into the property market as quickly as you can. From my experience, and I'm on house number 4 now, I always saved, because I don't want to sound like I'm a financially astute person. I've made some terrible blunders, but I've always managed to save a substantial amount of money, knowing that that is what's going to pay the lawyers and pay the transfer duties and everything else. So for my first house, I couldn't get into the property market as quickly as I wanted to because I didn't have that nest egg, if I could call it that. What is your advice? How quickly do you get into the property market? How much do you feel you need to actually put aside to ensure that you're not going to overextend?
For me, putting money aside ahead of time is not just about having the lump sum to pay for all those fees. Basically, it's also to stress your budget. Say, okay, I'm currently renting. I'm not going to take that step up into home ownership. Can I afford it on a month-to-month basis? Have I got room in my budget for the mortgage and for the running costs? And by actually saving that money every month and putting it away, you're starting to live on a budget that's more realistic about what you're going to be able to afford to live on in your home. So for me, it's actually an opportunity to sort of simulate home ownership. So it's both ways. It's spending the money and understanding effectively what it's going to cost you to live, living on that lesser amount that you're going to have to learn to live with, and at the same time having that deposit. And of course, having the deposit, first of all, it wipes years off your repayments, and secondly, it lowers your interest rate because the banks see you as lower risk. In fact, I was speaking to one of the banks the other day about putting down a 10% deposit, and he was saying that if you don't have a credit record, so some people have gone their whole life, they've chosen not to have a credit card. If you have that 10% deposit, they would consider that effectively a credit record because it shows that you have the discipline to put money away. So to me, that 10% deposit, or 20% if you can, but certainly 10% deposit really changes the game for you in terms of owning a property.
So there's a lot to bear in mind when you go for the first time home buyer, is not only to have the money to work out what your conveyancing fees are, what your transfer duties are going to be, whether you're going to pay more in rates and taxes, but whether you can actually put down a deposit. Now, I don't know if there's a kind of rule of thumb of how much that should be. It depends, I suppose, where you're buying and what you're buying. But you do need something a lot more substantial. You can't just look at a property price and say, I can afford bond repayments of 1.3 million.
You know what? You think you can afford bond repayments on 1.3 million, but your running costs, and I've done the estimations, are generally about 50% of your bond repayment. By the time you've factored in all the other running costs, your rates, your levies, electricity, your water, maintenance fees, if you live in a sectional title, there may be levies.
Yes.
So you're looking at, it's actually plus 50%, and I get a lot of readers at City Press writing in who've bought homes and can no longer afford them. Not necessarily the bond repayment, they just never knew what it was going to cost them to actually live in that home. And that's when the credit cards, the personal loans, and all of those things start, because you're literally using those to get by day to day.
And you're just going to sink into further and further into
Exactly.
debt, aren't you?
Exactly. So in fact, buying a home can sometimes be the worst financial decision you make. So I agree, getting in the property market and is a good idea, but only if you can afford to.
Yes, so timing is going to be important. Simon, I'm going to bring you in here. In fact, Maya's given me the number that I wanted, this 50%. Do you agree with that when you're looking at how much more you're going to need on top of your bond repayments in order to finance the transaction and then finance living in that house?
I think I would agree with my 50% of your bond repayment, but obviously it depends on what that bond repayment is. And to go back to your earlier point, what is the magic number around deposits? We work closely with Uber and Better Life Home Loans, the two mortgage originators in the market, and the numbers that they're talking about is an average deposit of 12%. So it may, on the one hand, it's what can you afford, on the other hand, it's what is the bank prepared to lend the money on the basis of. And yes, there are some great stories of 110% home loans, but the truth is most of the time they want to see more than 10% as a deposit before they'll even lend and finance the home. So that prudence that Maya was talking about around saving before you own the property is a really good practice, because it stress tests your budget and it shows that you can achieve the numbers that you're looking for. I mean, I've recently bought a property down here in Umdloti, and it's beautiful, it's on the beach, it's everything I've always wanted, but the amount of cost that I didn't factor in, that's starting to creep in. And it is the things that Maya was talking about. It's the maintenance costs. It's the, I recently had an issue with water, and this is another thing that people don't factor in, is some councils have water loss insurance, which is absolutely a must for any homeowner, but some don't. And if the water happens to be seeping away under the ground and all of a sudden you get a municipal bill of 3, 4, 5 times what you expected, that's just money that you're going to have to find. It's certainly not something you want to default on. So there's some challenges around home ownership, but I think what we're doing is we potentially talking down home ownership. I think what we should rather focus on, and what we see certainly on the site, is just a trend towards a more conscious property buyer and a more conscious home owner. So there's an awareness around what those costs are, and there's an awareness of the type of property that people want to purchase to avoid some of those costs. And there's definitely a changing trend in South Africa in terms of what the normal, typical property choice is. It's certainly becoming more first world.
Well, I'm glad you flagged the warning that we're talking this down. I don't want this to be seen as too daunting a prospect. I think what is important is to know that there are costs that you need to factor in. So let's just give people a sense of what that is. Transfer duties is something that I think that catches people by surprise. Is there a rule of thumb whereby you can calculate the ballpark of your transfer duties? Is there something that you've got on privateproperty.co.za that assists people in understanding, if I'm buying property worth X amount, my transfer duties are going to be Y amount?
Yeah, it's that classic sliding scale. So the powers that be have made it as difficult as possible to figure out what you're going to be paying in transfer duty. But yes, we've got calculators on the site, and it assists you to figure out what that duty is going to be. And it's usually a lot more significant than people think. When you add, take a typical kind of R1 million or say 1.3 million rand property, which is around the average property purchase price right now in South Africa, you'll be looking at transfer duty of around between 15 and 20 grand. You'll be looking at conveyancing fees on the transfer of title of about the same, 15,000 rand, just to pay the attorneys to register the documents. If you're taking out, say, a 1 million rand home loan on that property, that'll be a further bond registration fees, also through the attorney, of about 10 to 12 grand. And then you're going to add to that your initiation fee on the bond of about 6,000 rand. So before you know it, you're up at 50,000 rand on top of the purchase price of the property. And that's before, as Maya alluded to, the municipal deposits that you're going to have to make. So just the property ownership or the property transfer costs are a significant portion. So you can consider maybe 6-7% of the property price might go in costs and fees that you hadn't anticipated.
So the taxman takes his portion through the transfer duties. The lawyers take their portion as well. Now, we can't negotiate with SARS.
Can't negotiate with SARS.
SARS say that's our portion. Thank you very much. Lawyers, can you start negotiating with conveyancers to get a better rate?
Yes, in fact, some of the banks, in order to encourage you to use them, will actually discount some of those fees as well. So they'll use in-house lawyers, or they'll have discounted the fees. People often find actually if they're moving their mortgage from one bank to another, that's often thrown in as a sweetener. So certainly, I think you want to start negotiating those if you have the power to do so. And you can speak to the bank saying, "Oh, you're a good credit record." And by the way, this does come back to being a good credit. Have a good credit history. If you are attractive to a bank, it all becomes a lot cheaper. If you're the kind of client they really want, then you can negotiate your interest rate, and you can also look at negotiating those bond registration costs. So I think there are ways of negotiating and reducing fees as well, but not by much. And I mean, I think Simon's number there of 50,000. I was sitting there thinking that's not even the deposit yet. A deposit on a 1.3 million rand home is 130,000 if you're doing 10%, plus another 50. You're down to nearly 200,000 before you've even started this. And how many people watching right now have 200,000 rand just put away, not in their pension fund or in their long-term investments, just put away to enter the property market?
Yeah, you're rather hoping that they're making that 200,000 on the sale of their first house, but for the first-time homeowner, they have no such collateral.
Exactly.
So they would really battle to find that. That's why possibly the nest egg is so important. But then I think we're now starting to answer the question, how much should this nest egg be? How much should we be factoring in? Then when it comes to the rates and taxes, now that depends on the value of your property, isn't it? And
yes.
I'm not sure if I could go to, for example, City of Joburg or City of Durban website. Is there a calculator there?
There is a calculator. I can't remember. It's like 0.00013 cents per thousand or whatever. There is a number, and you can calculate that. So that is possible to look at it. But your estate agent should give that to you. I mean, it'd be interesting to ask Simon if they put it on their site. But often the estate agents are quite good. You go to the show day, and they have the rates and taxes there as well. And another one, and I think Simon's point is so valid. It's not about not buying a home. It's also about buying a home that is environmentally conscious, because when it comes to water and electricity, solar geysers. Water-wise gardens. Those are also all things that people have to start factoring in, and I believe will start pushing up the value of certain homes. I think when people start to really understand the running costs of a home, and they find an efficient home,
yes,
that you're going to probably increase your capital on that quite significantly.
Simon, do you are the estate agents transparent about the costs involved? Will they be assisting home buyers in understanding
In fact, what we do on the site is quite interesting. There's a lot of information that the consumer is really keen to see when they're looking for property. And it's not just, the classic stunning 3-bedroom with beautiful garden views or something. It's the meaningful information. It's the attributes of the property. It's the floor areas. I mean, floor area is becoming more and more important in property decisions, mainly because of the energy costs and the running costs of the home. But what we do on private property is we incentivize our agents through a ranking system on the site. So the more salient information they give us about the property listings, the higher up the ranking those property listings go on the website. And the whole intention is to drive this culture of transparency amongst our listing advertisers, our estate agents, our developers, our banks, our for sale by owner guys. And the idea is to so if you're putting in levies, rates, floor areas, all of these little nuggets of information that are not traditionally part of a listing, but are certainly information the consumer needs to see, the guys get extra points, and those listings are more visible to the consumers. And so we're creating this virtuous cycle where the more content and the more data you provide around the listing, the better it does when you market it. And I think that is important because, to Maya's point, we're definitely seeing a trend that certain types of properties, properties that are easier to maintain, that perhaps have a set levy, so they're part of a sectional title development. You know exactly what your kind of maintenance costs are going to be because they're sanctioned by the homeowners association. Those are far more popular than ever on the site. The demand is certainly there, and actually to the detriment of your traditional property in a traditional South African suburb. So the idea of the big house with the big floor area, the many rooms, the big garden, that concept is slowly but surely changing, and it's going towards a far more sustainable and perhaps easier lifestyle for people to maintain financially and from a time point of view. You know, people just don't have the time to devote to the big house anymore.
I love this concept of the houses being sustainable. I know buildings these days, office parks, they're looking at them being eco-friendly. Are they environmentally sustainable? And you're a fan of this. Has your house got double glazing?
Yes. Now, I was actually laughing when Simon was speaking because we made that massive error. We went from a smaller home, and then my second son was born, and of course we wanted to be close to the school, and we found this enormous fixer-upper because it was space for the children to play and a big garden, and we made all the mistakes. So that's why I know what I'm talking about. And you know, when we left Johannesburg and we moved to Cape Town, and we reduced our size of our house tremendously, we suddenly had all this money at the end of the month, because not mortgage, it wasn't necessarily the mortgage, it was actually just the running costs. So I think, yes, and when we initially rented for a while, and then when we decided to build, our whole real aim was to build a house that would have a very low energy usage. So we put in double glazing, and in fact in the Western Cape it's now become a requirement. If the windows are beyond a certain size, it has to be double glazing. We would have done it anyway, but I think it is a very interesting step. It makes building more expensive, but those sort of things, we put in that. We did the solar geyser, we did a water-wise garden. We've done everything to really keep our energy footprint and our running costs low.
But that's very interesting. So they've made it a requirement.
Yes, it is a requirement. And if your windows are beyond a certain size, and of course in Cape Town, if you're living anywhere near a mountain or sea, they have very big windows and huge sliding doors, and those now all need to be double glazed.
That'll come at a certain cost, though, won't it?
You know, I have to tell you, that's what we thought. As I said, it was part of our budget anyway, but it wasn't actually that much more expensive because it's become a little bit more competitive. I think now that it's a requirement and more companies are producing the products. For me, you know, the fact that I did not switch this last winter, and Cape Town gets cold winters.
Oh, yes.
We did not switch a heater on the entire winter, is, I think, testament to the benefits of double glazing.
That's extraordinary. So you might have to make that initial capital outlay, but you're going to get it back over the years.
And we have a built-in fireplace that uses pellets, that does all the right things, but that's all we used. And in fact, we used it maybe a couple of weeks of winter.
And the solar geyser, that must make a difference.
And the solar geyser as well, of course, is very cost effective. And even in winter, I mean, you have to kick across through to electricity, and we saw electricity kick up a little bit. But otherwise, you know, if I look at what we spend on electricity now compared to what we did in the big, you know, traditional South African home, it's probably about 20% of what we were spending.
20%.
Yeah.
Well, that's a significant amount.
And we put in a special pool pump that was low, you know, that also used low electricity. We were able to do that, and I think, you know, that's one of the benefits of building today, is that you don't have to because to retrofit is difficult, but if you're building from scratch, you can do these sorts of things.
Oh yes, tailor make it all for yourself. You did say that you bought a fixer-upper. Now, I can imagine that those tend to be quite attractive from a distance, because they will obviously come at a lower price.
Yes.
So you can buy a big property in a good area cheaply, because it needs, I think the estate agent's language is tender loving care.
Yes,
Meanwhile,
yes.
it means it's falling down and you've got to spend a fortune fixing it up.
Absolutely.
Now, you've described that as your biggest financial mistake?
It was our biggest financial mistake. And I think, you know, the running costs were one area of it that we hadn't expected. But the other was that, and I've now renovated and I've built, and building is actually cheaper per square meter, because of when you renovate, you don't know what you're going to find. So as you take down a wall or as you change something, you don't know what you're actually going to discover. And it's extremely difficult to really price for it effectively. So it is a very, very, certainly not a financially wise move, I would say, yeah. Unless you've done your numbers, you have a good build, but you also just, those renovations were very expensive. And over time, what we certainly felt, by the time we came to sell, this shift in the market had happened, and a big home on a big garden with big running costs, it wasn't as attractive as it was when we originally bought it. So certainly, yes, I would say that is the trend. That is why, I mean, we didn't necessarily lose money on the actual capital of the house, but what we put into the house and the running costs, you know, we could have probably funded our child's entire education from that.
That's significant.
Yeah.
That really is significant. Simon, I think you've first brought up this issue of maintenance. Now, what we've done is we've run through all the costs over and above the purchase price of a house that one could incur. We've been through transfer duties, conveyancing fees, all of that, rates and taxes. Maya's talking now about the maintenance of a house, and I think that that's something that people tend to forget about, and in fact don't factor in, don't maintain a house, and then you're not going to be able to sell it for as much as you would have liked, because it does become a bit of a wreck. I wish houses were static objects. They're not. They're dynamic. They change all the time. From your perspective, talk me through this issue of maintaining a home and the costs involved there.
Oh, I mean, I think any of us that have owned a home know what those costs tend to be. They sometimes sneak up on you. You know, it's a geyser bursting, and it's a pool cracking, or you know, it's these things that you don't necessarily factor in when you buy the property. I think, you know, being private property is predominantly the sale of existing residential houses. So these are houses that have had owners in them before. They're going through their second or third set of hands. And so the condition of the home is critical to the value and the price that it fetches on the market. And certainly the houses that have stayed contemporary, you know, they've kept up to date with their maintenance. The walls are painted, the garden's neat, the interior is neat and clean. Where they can, they've added those energy-saving elements, and there's none of the difficult problems. Those properties are very sought after, obviously depending on the area, and you'll definitely realize a much higher value in the market than those properties that have not been well maintained. So if you're looking to protect your property investment, it's the stitch in time saves nine concept. You know, you absolutely have to allocate some form of budget on a monthly or quarterly basis to make improvements around the home. That's not easy to do. I mean, we've just discussed how difficult and constrained a budget can be, but simple things can make a massive, massive difference. In fact, we're working on a really cool stats tool in the business. We're hoping to launch it next year, but depending on the area you're in, certain attributes to the home are statistically relevant attributes in driving value. And what we're looking to do is present to market this little calculator or this tool that allows you to look at your particular neighborhood and say, what improvements could I make to my house that would have the most statistically relevant influence on the property value when I sell it. So it's really cool things like, well, in this particular neighborhood, 4-bedroom homes are far more sought after than 3 bedrooms. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, add a bedroom and you're going to get a significantly higher yield when you sell. You know, simple additions, decks, patios, you know, ensuite versus shared bathrooms. So we're looking at doing those kinds of things, and I think that will be helpful for the consumer when they're looking at maintenance tasks or small renovation jobs or DIY projects. A house is a living asset, and you have to continually be improving it and adding to it if you really want to realize the wealth at the end of it. And so we're hoping to provide some insights into what is the right direction for homeowners to go when they're thinking about small jobs like that.
That sounds like a fabulous tool to have. I must say, I think the biggest mistake I made when I bought houses was that I didn't properly examine what I was buying. And on 2 occasions, I've bought houses that had been renovated. But because you go on a show day, and because my wife falls in love with every single house that she visits, no matter what the house is, and she wants that house every single time, I don't have the opportunity to walk around and find out, do the windows all close properly, for example? Are those beautiful wooden floors, are they creaking in any way? And once I've then moved in, I find myself, as I am right now, into the 3rd year of fixing up that house. Now, I don't know, do people properly examine what they're buying? Because you get one day and you got the estate agent doing the hard sell
And
on you.
in one day, you make your biggest financial commitment of your life.
Mad.
It's quite remarkable. If you think how many things we agonize over buying a pair of shoes, for example, we probably spend more time doing that than we
Yes.
do buying a home. But that is actually where property inspectors come in. Now, it's a big thing in the UK, and in fact, you can't buy a house without it being inspected by a property inspector. And we're starting to see, it'll be interesting to hear from Simon, but we're starting to see certainly more and more sellers and also even agents recommending property inspection. So you've got somebody who goes in and actually does a top to bottom inspection. And because it's, it's the things that you can see, but it's the things you can't see, often the structural things, roofs,
The wiring.
problems or wiring or those kind of things. I mean, when we bought our Fixerupper, we discovered that despite having an electrical certificate, wasn't earthed.
No.
They are fraudulent, half of them. So to have somebody come in and actually you pay, and it's not a lot of money, I can't remember, it's like 3,000 or 4,000 rand, to me, it's just a no-brainer. And I think as a seller, you could also go and do that. You can go and do the property inspection. If there's anything you need to fix before selling, get it fixed, and you can be honest with the buyer, and I think it will position your property that much ahead of everybody else.
I didn't know that this property investigator existed, Simon. Yeah, I heard you nodding in agreement there when Maya spoke about the issues of the wiring.
Yes, so there are a couple of issues, and this is usually the problem is buyers don't think enough about these compliance issues because they don't have to pay for them. So by law, the seller has to pay for things like an electrical compliance certificate to prove that the wiring is all safe in the house, and other things, particularly down here in Natal, there's the entomologist report to make sure your house is not full of borer or other parasites in the wood. And because those are paid for at the seller side, the buyers obviously, they often don't take enough effort to look into, number one, who's doing that compliance certificate, and whether it meets their approval, because ultimately they're buying that property and they need to be comfortable that everything has been done. So I would definitely encourage buyers to get involved in the process of the compliance certificates. There's a lot of information that flows around in that space. And to your point about property inspectors, that is a trend that we're seeing. There's certainly, and particularly in Joburg actually, because you've got a number of properties that are now aging, some of them even close to the heritage age in Joburg. And they're in some beautiful areas and they're still fetching some great values, but you don't really know what you're getting in terms of the workmanship, the plumbing, the electrics, the unseen hazards or the unseen costs that could pop their head up down the line. So property inspectors, they like property valuers, basically. It's a separate profession and you can hire one. So if you, as a buyer, are unsure, you can hire a property inspection, or you can put it as part of your sale agreement terms that I'll sign the sale agreement and I'll make it subject to an inspector going through the home. And I think that's a very worthwhile thing for people to do, especially if there's some element of uncertainty. Sometimes, whether it be the estate agent or the seller, they're not deliberately trying to cover up a problem in the home. They may actually just be unaware of it. I mean, you've lived in homes and I've lived in homes, and you become used to certain things that and you forget about them even being there. Oh yes, that pipe is always leaked, or I never turn that tap on, and I think a property inspector certainly gets to the bottom of some of those issues. And in fact, we've had some discussions with insurance companies as well. And there is this discussion at the moment around whether there should be an insurance product to back the purchase of a new home. So almost like a guarantee or a warranty on a motor vehicle when you purchase it. Should there be something like that for property? So there's some interesting things coming to market, I think, in the next couple of years. But if you are currently in the market, a property inspection is always a good idea.
I like this idea, Simon, of writing it into your contract. But who pays for that property inspector then? If it's going to be, what was your estimate, 4,000 Rand, Maya?
Which is actually, when you think of all the other costs that are going in, it's probably the cheapest of all of them.
It certainly is.
In terms of the biggest benefit, yeah.
It's another financial constraint when you're being lumbered with all the other things that you might not know about or have forgotten about, and suddenly they go, oh, by the way, there's also 4,000 for the property inspector. Who should actually bear the cost of that? Should it be the buyer or the seller?
I'd be interested to hear Simon's comments, but for me, I would, as the buyer, would like to be paying for it, because I would want to know who did the inspection, and they were doing the inspection for me. And
yes.
that is a big, if you hear, electrical certificates that are fraudulent because the seller paid for them, I would want to have control of that.
I've been burnt, and I think that's the appropriate verb, twice because of the fraudulent electricity compliance certificate, and that is the person selling the house getting the electrician to come round, and it hasn't been done properly. So I suppose for peace of mind, it's going to be the buyer who pays that. But I would suggest that the seller, well, I suppose I'm talking about an ideal world here where there is no corruption. I would like to see the seller paying for that building inspector. What are your thoughts on that one, Simon? Do you think it should be the buyer or the seller who pays for the building inspector's report?
As you say, I think in a perfect world, the seller should be paying for the inspection. In fact, this is fairly contentious, I guess, but being in the property marketing space. But I think South Africa as a cultural norm has created some problems for itself. The sales process right now actually puts very little pressure on the seller to make any upfront investment in the sale of their property. So you can just walk through the sales process. You invite some estate agents to the property, they give you a valuation, usually for free as a loss leader to get the business, and then you sign a mandate with maybe one or two of them, and there's absolutely no money down from the seller. So effectively, they are speculating with the market as to whether they sell that property or not. And unfortunately, I think that sets up the whole process for a little bit of, I wouldn't say lack of ethics, but I think it just sets it up wrong from the start. The seller hasn't committed to the sale. In other markets around the world, the seller would pay perhaps for the marketing costs of the property. They would pay for an inspection to be done up front to say to all buyers that come through the property, this has been inspected, it's 100%, or here are the known faults, here are the known defaults as I'm meant to tell you about. And I think that it would be great to see South Africa go in that direction. I think changing a market dynamic is very difficult, though. In South Africa, we tend to pay the highest estate agency commissions anywhere in the world, but that's mainly because the seller wants to take absolutely no risk on the sale and put all that risk on the agent. So I would like to see a more distributed model where you see the seller come to the party, put perhaps a little bit of money into the actual sale of their property up front. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So you do get these problems. And I would agree with Maya, for your peace of mind as a buyer, don't make the seller do the property inspection. Pay the relatively small fee yourself and get it done yourself. But that shouldn't preclude you from signing the sale agreement. I think it's important. People feel very under pressure to make an offer when they are in the purchasing journey. I've been there myself. You see the house, you really like it, you think it's a deal, you're worried about perhaps the other guy getting it before you, so you want to sign an offer. Just scribble in a clause there that it's subject to you doing a property inspection with a professional, and then you pay for it as the buyer, and you get the peace of mind you're looking for.
Yeah, certainly. I think that sounds like very sound advice. You don't want to find some kind of latent defect which is going to destroy the contract in the final analysis. Sort it out ahead of time. In the last 10 minutes, I'm going to take a couple of questions that we got. Mike from Melville has sent through a question. He says, I bought my house for 1.1 million Rand in 2009. Since then, I've spent 300,000 Rand on renovation, so 6 years he's spent that amount of money, 50,000 Rand a year. The present estimated value of the house is 1.6 million, but it looks like I'll have to spend at least another 150,000 on bathrooms, damp proofing, and an outbuilding to get it to a level I would like it to be at. Am I at the risk of over-capitalizing? What are your thoughts there, Maya?
Sure, Simon may be better to answer that because he'd know what the properties are fetching in Melville. As it was a Melville call.
Melville.
So I suppose for me it would be around understanding, they always say you want to be the cheapest house in the most expensive street, or
Yes.
what it is. So you'd need to have a look at what the properties are around you're fetching. So maybe with all those upgrades, the property would go from 1.6 to 2 million. But is there an appetite for buyers of 2 million rand in Melville. So he'd need to do his research around that, because I think overcapitalization can be a problem in the short term, certainly. I mean, over time, one generally recoups the money, but one needs to look at it from that point of view.
Certainly. Well, I used to live in West Dean and knew that I couldn't afford Melville because the property prices were so high, but I know Melville's been through some fluctuations. Have you got any sense of that, Simon? Would that be overcapitalizing from Mike's point of view, that he's spending a significant amount of money more to fix up his house? It might go to what you said a little bit earlier, where you've got that calculator to realize in Melville, if you don't have the added room, you don't have the outbuilding, you're not going to get a good price.
Exactly. And that's the reason that we're trying to put that tool in place, is to give guys, sorry, what was the message? Mike, yeah, to give Mike an idea of exactly what we're talking about there. Look, I've just looked at Melville and the property prices in that area, and I would say at a guess that there's still headroom on his value. You know, if he's at 1.6, I obviously don't know the attributes of the house or the floor area or anything like that, but properties have been trading for around 2 million in that area, so there is a bit of headroom for him. My concern would be that he's already spent 300,000 Rand on the property. When he sells it, he's likely to incur the estate agency commission, and that's another thing that sellers don't factor in when they sell, is that there's going to be a minimum 5% that they take off the sale price, as well as a few costs on his side. You mentioned capital gains right at the beginning of the insert. So I would caution, Mike. I would say, less is sometimes more in these situations. We find often property marketing, it's about presenting an opportunity to a new buyer. That buyer is not necessarily looking for a perfect home. They're looking for an opportunity to live in a space that they feel very comfortable with. So if there are opportunities to make improvements, let them spend the next 150, 200,000 Rand. Just make sure that what he's already got on the site is as presentable and beautiful and marketable as possible. So perhaps some small expense on gardening, painting, cleaning, and perhaps even staging the property appropriately, as well as perhaps a professional photographer on marketing. Those costs can sometimes be better than the heavy wet works costs of construction.
Yeah, now sometimes, and certainly speaking from experience, I've known that a good lick of paint can hide a multitude of sins, but I suppose that's where your building inspector comes in. Yes. Be able to see that this is hiding some bad cracks as a result of structural faults, where somebody's just tried to paint over a massive crack. That would be important.
Yes, and I think also it's quite interesting, Simon's point about let somebody else spend the money, because you get two different types of people. Some people who want to walk in and the house is exactly what they want and pristine, they're just not the DIY kind of people. Yeah. But other people who want to turn it into something of their own, and you give that opportunity. It's often, do you do the big kitchen renovation just before you sell or not? And sometimes the advice is don't. Let somebody else leave a little bit of the money on the table and let them put the kitchen in that they want to put in and live through the hell of renovating a kitchen.
Sand down your own kitchen cupboards. Exactly. Varnish them yourself and move on. That's right. Yeah. They can put in the granite tops. Susan from Cape Town says, struggling to choose between a good house in a bad suburb and a bad house in a good one. Well, I think you alluded to this. In fact, you mentioned this earlier, Maya. Similarly priced. What to do? Okay. There's a conundrum if ever I've seen one.
Again,
so
Simon,
it's the same price?
Yeah, again, Simon would probably be better at this. But for me, I think, that was a Cape Town call. Cape Town is all about area. I have never in my life, moving from Johannesburg, you have no concept of how area plays as it does in Cape Town. It's incredibly critical. Literally one side of the road to the other can have massive price variations. So I would say, especially being a Cape Town call, I would go for area well above the house. So you can fix your house. You cannot pick it up and move it to a different area.
Okay, so a bad house in good area. What are your thoughts on that one, Simon? Cape Town, good house in bad area or bad house in good area? Which is your option if they're similarly priced?
It actually doesn't matter. Anywhere in the country, you pick the good neighborhood first. You have to go for location. South Africa is in a really tricky economic climate at the moment. I don't think we're going to see significant across-the-board growth in property values. So what you're actually going to see is some markets do well, some niche areas and neighborhoods do well, and some areas that actually flatline or perhaps even go backwards in terms of value. So now more than ever, in today's kind of economic uncertainty, I would definitely be picking the good neighborhood, because that neighborhood is far more likely to achieve some capital growth over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so location isn't a myth, that's a reality. Paul from Sandton says, need to choose between a flat in Sandton and a house in an estate. I'm presuming Paul doesn't say the estate's in Sandton. What's the best investment?
Both of those is on the right track. Both of them are particularly desirable property choices at the moment. Sandton, we're seeing an incredible growth in property values, and I think it's because of the lifestyle opportunity of living and working within a close proximity. Joburg is all about commute times. It's becoming increasingly about how close you are to the office or to the shopping mall or to the local pub in the evening, whatever it is that you enjoy. And I think Sandton offers all of that. So I would say the apartment, the lock up and go, the levy, and the convenience factor are always going to be good. And what I like about it as well is it gives you the opportunity in the future to perhaps move on, retain the property assets, and put a tenant in it. So it's a highly sought after tenant opportunity and rental opportunity. So should his life take a turn for the better and he's able to buy a second property, then it's a great property to hang on to. But estate living, is also extremely popular at the moment. We're seeing traditional suburbs in South Africa, your normal Joburg suburbs, actually declining in property price. And it's sad to see that. No one wants to see property go backwards, but it's going backwards because that market is buying inside of estates. If you can put a wall around it and call it safe and secure, often people are very, very swayed by that, particularly people with young families. So really, both of them are excellent investment decisions. I would say if you're looking purely from an investment decision, the apartment in Sandton is better, but obviously lifestyle factors in. I don't think you'll lose money on either of those investments, though. They're both very on trend.
Okay, well, that's a comprehensive answer, Maya.
Yeah, I would raise one flag, and that's not for both of them, is to do with levies and corporate bodies, because I get a lot of complaints from readers about corporate bodies, and you've got to know if that corporate body is solvent. You've got to know how levies are determined, these special levies that come along. And I find this particularly if people have retired and they've bought into state duty, into an estate, and suddenly they decide, oh, there needs to be a special levy because we have to redo the front gates, and these pensioners are slapped with a 15,000 Rand special levy. So I would say that if you are going to buy, and I mean Simon's correct, we're certainly seeing security as the big issue. So estate or within a flat or in a complex, get involved in the body corporate, because that's where you have no control. And we had that debate. Did we build inside an estate or did we build outside? And actually we didn't in the end. We're in a fairly safe area, so security wasn't a big issue. But our issue was the rate at which those levies are increasing. They're increasing well above inflation. And so over time I want to be bond free. I will never ever be levy free.
Yes.
And you're contributing to the upkeep of a really big area. And where we live, the estates are fairly big, the levies are big. We're looking at 4,000 Rand a month on levies. So I think that would be my one caution on that example.
Well, we've, I think, unpacked a lot of issues. I hope we haven't dissuaded people who've never bought property from buying property. It is an absolute thrill. Once you've got your own home, there's nothing like it if it's a good place and it's in the area that you want. We've had a lot of advice from Simon and from Maya. I'm going to end our Iris session with my thanks to you, Maya. And if people do have questions, there's always mayaonmoney.co.za or
on Twitter, same Twitter handle, Maya on Money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or City Press. Buy City Press and find all your...
City Press. Right, all of the stuff will be in the City Press.
Yes, all your personal finance. And Simon Bray, thanks to you as well with that fabulous backdrop of the wave crashing over you. It made us in this rather hot studio rather envious. And privateproperty.co.za, we know that that's got a wealth of information. My thanks to you. And for those who've been watching, thank you to you as well. That's the end of this Iris session on the Change Exchange, brought to you by BrightRock. I'm David O'Sullivan. We'll be with you again the next time.